City Football Group, Red Bull, Ineos, Eagle Football Holdings. You know, you love them or you hate them, but multi-club ownership isn't just the future of professional football, it's the present, right? Not only have these billion-dollar entities taken the men's game by storm, but they're really building up brand equity in the women's game, right? Asli, you're seeing it firsthand with your work at The Athletic. You know, it's trailblazers like Michelle Kang, Kara Nortman, and others who are really, creating this new model that's leading the charge in the women's game. This week's episode, we're going to dive into multi-club ownership. On the women's side, we're going to have a World Cup date and a lot more on this week's episode of Finance of Football. I'm veteran sports journalist Michael Array.
And I'm Asli Pellet, and I write about women's soccer for The Athletic. Welcome to Finance of Football. This week's episode is all about multi-club ownership, particularly in women's game. Before we dive into Kang's Kineska or Kara Nortman's Monarch Collective and Mercury 13, let's zoom out and talk about multi-club ownership in general. And I think, Michael, you want to take us through like the sometimes, not so pleasant world of multi-club ownership.
According to a 2023 UEFA report, more than 180 clubs worldwide were part of multi-club ownership structure. Now compare that to 40 in 2012. So in 10 years, 11 years, you've multiplied that exponentially. And it all kind of kicked off back in the late 1990s where you had Joe Louis, not to be confused with the boxer, but another gentleman named Joe Louis, who was spearheading the English National Investment Company, ENIC, that purchased stakes in clubs, in Athens and Slavia Prague and Basel and Glasgow Rangers. And, it wasn't until that got the ball rolling where, multi-club ownership kind of went mainstream in the early 2000s, thanks to two big powerhouses. We're looking at City Football Group and Red Bull. They've had the most success, and with that has also come kind of the most opposition and the most hatred.
Especially when City Football Group, they were shaping their brand image, were changing the logos and names of the clubs, and there were a lot of resistance from the fans whose clubs were being incorporated into this big behemoth of multi-club ownership group, which on one hand, helps small clubs be able to use a big company's resources, right? From marketing power to potentially partnership deals that can come their way. But meanwhile, a lot of fans were very upset. It's like really losing the identity and what made them love the colors of the clubs they supported for so long.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the situation we're faced in global football today is you want your club to succeed. And in order for your club to succeed, both domestically and, in Europe or whatever continent they play in, you need money, you need resources because it is this arms race. And in order to do that, you need investment. So whether that is private equity, whether it's, a local celebrity buying into your club, or whether it is a foreign entity, a Red Bull, a City Football Group who are going to come in and inject a bunch of cash, and it works. Manchester City, I'm a Manchester United fan. We all know this. Manchester City was nobody compared to Manchester United back in the day. And I'm not trying to say this in a mean way.
No, I know. You're totally right.
Look at the history, the
they
global
were in and out of the
appeal.
championship. They were not always in the top of the table like they are. You're totally right.
Exactly. They were a blip on the radar in global soccer, and then City Football Group comes in, and now all of a sudden Manchester City, you walk around the streets in New York, you walk anywhere, you probably see more Manchester City sky blue than you do Manchester United red. And I know, my club has fallen on somewhat hard times over the last decade as City have gone up, but it just goes to show the power and the influence of multi-club ownership. And I used to work for New York City Football Club, right? I was there their first season, and you see, okay, we're going to sign David Villa. He was the first signing for NYCFC, massive signing. Where does he go play? He goes down to Australia to play for, Man City's club that they have in Australia, Melbourne City. So it's like you get the reps there. They signed Frank Lampard, and he goes and plays for Man City because you're under that same umbrella. So there are so many benefits to this. But you mentioned that opposition where I remember having to write this story for NYCFC why the club has the colors that it has. Oh, it's because, the city was founded by the Dutch and then taken over by the English and William of Orange, and here's why they have orange and here's why they have blue, just like the Knicks and the Mets. And I was like, guys, stop. You have blue because you're owned by by City Football Group, and they have sky blue, and City is the crown jewel of this, company. So all of the clubs have those same colors. All of the Red Bull clubs have the Red Bull logo on the front of them, right? Red Bull bought into Leeds recently, and guess who their title sponsor is on that kit? It's the Red Bull logo. So that's where
And, like
people,
going back to New York City FC, their stadium being built in New York is Etihad Stadium. Another show of financial power to be able to build something that quickly in New York City, I would say.
yeah, 100%. They're the title sponsors of the club. They're on the shirt. It's the stadium in Manchester. Now it's going to be the stadium in New York. So you're just really, it's like this force multiplier where if you are a brand like City Football Group or you are a brand like a corporate partner, you now have X times on your investment. I'm not saying that they got in at Manchester City and they're giving away the naming rights for NYCFC for free or at a discount, but you now have access to more opportunities to grow your brands. So it's, a revenue resource multiplier. It's a feeder talent pipeline, right? Hey, we need some players. Let's get some young guys, some experience. Let's move them around.
Mhm.
Let's do all that kind of stuff like that. But it does come with drawbacks, right?
Yeah, one of them is, like we said, fan opposition, which is huge. Although, no matter how much they opposed, I think that battle has been lost, right? Like they are, if you're
If you
decide
win on
if
the field, it doesn't matter, right? That's all, that's the end of
they
it.
come and buy it, and the club is sold, and everybody, happy or not, it's now part of that multi-club ownership group. The other is potential conflict of interest that UEFA started to pay attention to, especially in Europe, especially with the groups that you just mentioned, when they are competing in the same um, international tournaments like Champions League. There is a conflict of interest. I always think of it like the Formula One. You know how you have two drivers? You have to, like, one leads the way and the other one at the end of the race, like, sort of gives it away. And I think UEFA is very carefully observing and trying to avoid that to happen. But today, our job is to tell you more about the women's side. So after the break, we'll look at the emerging trend in the women's game and who's leading the way. So stay tuned.
Welcome back to Finance of Football. I don't know if this is the right metaphor, but like owning houses in the Hamptons and Key West and Newport Beach, multi-club ownership is all the rage these days, right? Who wants to just be stuck in one beautiful beach location when you can have three at your disposal? And we're seeing a lot of, rich folks, investors and billionaires and these conglomerates really doing that when there's, three major players kind of paving a path here on the women's game and multi-club ownership. And Asa, this is your area of expertise, so I'm going to rely on you for a lot of the details here. But arguably the number one, the baddest lady in the room is Michelle Kang, right? She's got the Washington Spirit of the NWSL, OL Lyonnais in France, and the London City Lionesses in the Women's Super League in England. So, please tell us more about Michelle Kang and Kineska.
When Michelle came into the picture, and I would say this was when NWSL franchises, expansion franchises, were going for $2 to $5 million range. She came and she paid $35 million for the Washington Spirit. Everybody, like, it was like all eyes on this woman who didn't have a sports background, and she was very candidly say she didn't even know the rules of the game, but she was in it because she believed that women's sport, especially women's soccer, was where her dollars spent will bring her the best return on investment. Not only she raised the bar for the franchise valuations in the NWSL, she also looked on the other side where football is even bigger culturally and historically. She went to Europe, and she took over a traditionally very successful women's team, Olympique Lyonnais, and the transaction that she put together to be able to separate the club from the men's side and buy the women's side and run that club to back-to-back, Champions League titles and the league titles. That already shows not only she was right about investing in these clubs. Look at Washington Spirit in the NWSL. It's one of the most successful, teams in the league commercially and on the pitch with superstars like Trinity Rodman playing in the squad, and same in Olympique Lyonnais. But she didn't stop there, which is very interesting. She went and bought a team in London, London City Lionesses. Back when she bought it, they were competing in the second division. Today, the season plays at the Women's Super League. So that's, I think, we can say pioneer in her own way. And then, of course, the other pioneer on the women's side is Kara Nortman and her Monarch Collective. Nortman brought together some big name investors, not necessarily big in sports, but Natalie Portman and Julie Arman and Alexis Ohanian back in 2022 and bought the LA franchise of NWSL, Angel City FC. And the first thing I think they've done before even the players took a step inside the pitch, they built an incredible commercial model for their team, built a supporter group. And before the season, the inaugural season kicked off, it was one of the most commercially successful teams in NWSL. In fact, according to recent Sportico valuations, it's the highest valued NWSL team in the league. And they didn't stop there. Monarch Collective invested in San Diego Wave, Boston Legacy FC, and most recently, FC Viktoria Berlin in Germany, which is their first investment outside of the US and probably won't be the last. Who knows? I feel like their model is they don't want to have the majority ownership of these groups, but they want to stay according to the NWSL's investment regulations. You can have multiple minority stakes in different teams. So that allows Monarch Collective to invest in different teams, bring their know-how to each team to grow their commercial presence, their front offices, and their success on and off the pitch.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. Like we're looking at, Kang's Kaniska and how they have properties at clubs in the US and in Europe. Monarch Collective is predominantly in the NWSL, but then you have Mercury 13, which is kind of doing what Monarch Collective is doing in the US, but over in Europe, right? It's Bristol City Women in England, FC Como Women in Italy, and FC Badalona in Spain. So what are they building over there in Europe?
They came out and told the world that they are building a multi-club ownership model. And for a while, they only had FC Como Women in Italy, and it was like a fashion brand, I would say. Not that they don't play great football, but there also is like a fashion aspect to it. They were supported by Mark Lasry's Avenue Sports Fund, which invested in Mercury 13. And coincidentally, that fund recently invested in an NWSL club and bought a minority stake in North Carolina Courage. It's not a Mercury 13 investment per se. It's, separated from that, but now they're all in the same group, right? Like you said, they're looking at both sides of the Atlantic for their investments.
Yeah, listen, I love it. I think just highlighting these three groups just shows that there isn't a one size fits all model to multi-club ownership, right? Like it isn't just, okay, here's our name. We're going to call every team that we own all around the world this same name, same colors, whatever, right? Like all of these teams have different identities and some straddle the Atlantic on both sides of the Atlantic. Some are predominantly focused in the US, some are predominantly in Europe. And, what as a fan of women's soccer and wanting to see it grow and become, not the men's game, but the women's game, but at that same level, if not higher, like I love it, right? Because we've talked about, this whole month about women's soccer and the NWSL in particular with the season kicking off a couple of weeks ago. The league needed stability. The league needs money. The league needs media rights and eyeballs and sponsors and all of those things. And this model really helps that. Like, look at all these clubs that we mentioned. they're all successful. And if they're not, they're on the path to become successful because of all the assets and the opportunities and the resources and the money that's now behind them, whether it's, Michelle Kang or Kara Nortman or the group behind Mercury 13, they're investing in it and it's going to pay dividends. And, you know, the exciting thing for me too is it's proving to the next generation, not only of players that this is
Uh-huh.
viable, but of the next generation of business people, men and women who go, "Ooh, I want to own a soccer club and oh, I want to invest in this because I see it's an amazing opportunity and it's only going to pay more and more dividends." The 2027 Women's World Cup is coming up in Brazil. That's going to be absolutely amazing. And don't be surprised if these three organizations and others don't pop up between now and 2031 World Cup coming to the US, Mexico, Jamaica, and Costa Rica as we have more and more interest and investment in the women's game. Welcome back to Finance of Football. Now it's time for another World Cup update we like to call World Cup Date. We're less than 80 days away from kickoff, and unsurprisingly, there's a lot of news. So let's dive in. Unless you've been living under a rock for the past couple of weeks, you know that the US and Israel attacked Iran. And obviously that's an issue geopolitically, but it's also an issue when it comes to sports because Iran is set to play in the World Cup this summer. So they had requested to move its World Cup matches, unsurprisingly, from the US, who, like I just mentioned, attacked them, to Mexico. But unfortunately, it's been denied or at least put on ice by FIFA. So without specifically naming Iran, FIFA President Gianni Infantino recently addressed the complex geopolitical situation clouding the upcoming tournament. He said, quote, "FIFA can't solve geopolitical conflicts, but we are committed to using the power of football and the World Cup to build bridges and promote peace as our thoughts are with those that are suffering as a consequence of the ongoing wars." It's a hell of a PR statement there. So the issue here again is Iran doesn't want to come to the US. And can you blame them? US President Donald Trump, hardly one to mince words, recently said it would not be, quote, appropriate for Iran to play their matches in the US, quote, for their own life and safety, unquote. So we're kind of getting mixed signals here from, the president of the US and the president of FIFA. One is saying football is going to unite the world. And the other one is saying, hey, you should fear for your life when you come here. So at this point, Iran is scheduled to play 2 World Cup matches in Los Angeles before another in Seattle. They face New Zealand and Belgium in LA on June 15th and 21, followed by a match against Egypt on June 26th in Seattle.
It will be insane to think that such short period before they kick off, we're still not sure one of the teams are going to participate in the biggest World Cup of our lifetime.
Fortunately, not all World Cup updates are bad. It's been great if you are a fan of soccer kits and soccer culture, because Adidas, Nike, and Puma have all released the majority of their kits home and away for their respective nations participating in this summer's tournament. Adidas, which has been the official match ball supplier of the FIFA World Cup since 1970, announced the away kits for all 25 partner federations, including the 13 currently scheduled to participate in the World Cup. I am beyond excited about this because as someone who grew up with Adidas and that trefoil logo, it's coming back. It's been 36 years since we've seen it in a World Cup, and it's coming back this summer. So get excited about that. Not to be outdone by their biggest rival, Nike also released kits for its nations, including Brazil, England, Uruguay, South Korea, Norway, and of course, the U.S. men's national team. What do you think of those kits?
I was waiting for you to be here last week when I was talking about that. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about the red and white,
Waves.
stripe waves. Yeah, exactly. I was thinking, is that because they want to confuse the rival team when they're running around with those waves and everybody's like little disoriented? What do you think about that? I like the other one, by the way. I like the blue one. I really think it's cool. It's very urban.
Yeah, I like them both. Obviously, the red and white stripes, predominant on the American flag. You have the waving aspect of it. I get it. To me, it reminds me of the ribbon candy from growing up, right? The red and white kind of ribbon candy. So if anything, it makes me hungry. But no, I'm, from what I've read, the US players they played a part in the design of the kit. It wasn't just, okay, we're Nike designers, we're going to come up with this and you have to wear it. So it seems like it was very hands-on from a US team perspective. Sticking with Nike, Brazil, they made some headlines as well because their kit is going to be Jumpman. It's going to be Jordan brand, right? It's not going to be Nike in the swoosh. It's going to be Air Jordan in his infamous pose. So definitely some good stuff there. And again, I think there's just so much involved with, not only do these kits need to be high quality for the players on the field, especially since it's going to be so hot and humid, but they also need to be fashion statements for all the people off of it. And, speaking of that, we both were at the Puma launch event in New York City and Brooklyn. So Puma announced their kits for their 11 nations, highlighted by Portugal, Morocco, Ghana, Senegal, and I always love to say this, the Côte d'Ivoire, at such a fun event in New York.
Côte
Côte d'Ivoire,
d'Ivoire.
not Côte, it's Côte.
Cote.
See,
Yeah, COTE is Cote d'Ivoire.
I love to say it. It doesn't mean I know how to pronounce it properly.
But there was it was an amazing event. And I know you were about to say probably they were also promoting each country's food and drinks and fashion and culture. So I think it was a very well thought event. And I think if there's anything that brings us together other than our I think obsession for kit and different collecting them or wearing them, food is a great way of bringing people together and teaching about their culture. So, chapeau to Puma for organizing such fun event in a great location, by the way.
Exactly. Well, we talked about some of our favorite kits. Now, what are yours? Which kits do you like? Which kits don't you like? Be sure to leave a comment on our social media channels, and we'd love to get into a good, kit debate with you. So thanks for watching. Finance of Football comes to you from the Frequency Machine Podcast Network. Hit us up on Instagram and YouTube at Finance of Football Pod for more football business and our enlightened opinions. Or search Finance of Football on LinkedIn and Facebook. This episode was produced by co-hosts Michael Larray and Asa Pellet. It was edited by Ryan Hammond. Mixing and mastering by Julian Kwasniewski. Our theme music is by Hatamitsunami. Our show is executive produced by Ryan, alongside Stacy Book and Avi Glajansky for Frequency Machine. Find more about Finance of Football at frequencymachine.com. Follow us on YouTube at Finance of Football and listen anywhere you get podcasts. Please like and subscribe. Help us reach more people. We love you for it.